I was very focused on my career and advancing my career, and probably put too much emphasis on that. If I had it to do over again, I probably would spend more time with the family.
What's you doing, Brandon? You going in the water?
The younger of my two sons, Brandon, was born on September 30th, 1985. Brandon was just a really good-natured young little kid, very friendly, very outgoing to embrace other children, and really never judged anybody. And as he got older, those attributes stuck with him. When Brandon turned 12, he started taking bass lessons. His brother Stephen had taken guitar lessons, so he just felt like he wanted to have his own instrument. And he was very dedicated to it. He had a lot of natural aptitude for playing the instrument. He got really, really good at it. In addition to that, he liked the outdoors. He liked to hike in the mountains and the desert. December 2003, I'd started a new job and was traveling throughout the state of California with my boss for a week. I came home on a Friday night, drove home, and as soon as I got there, the first place I went was straight to my son Brandon's room. Now, 9 times out of 10 on a Friday night, he'd be gone out to the movies or whatever with friends. But I opened his door and there he was lying in bed watching TV, propped up, and a big smile came across his face. So I went over and gave him a hug. And we didn't even say a word to one another. It was just kind of a homecoming sort of thing. Highly unusual, but very touching and in retrospect, very important to me. The next day was January 10th, 2004. I had gotten up, made my coffee, and Brandon was in playing his bass and he was on the computer. And then I went in and joined him with my guitar and he on his bass, and we practiced a few songs. And then shortly thereafter, he made mention of a hike that he and some friends had intended to go on. And I started just feeling uncomfortable with this idea of the hike. And it actually got to the point where I felt, and I don't claim to have visions or unusual paranormal type events take place, but I felt this kind of overwhelming feeling of like an energy. It was a feeling of impending danger, and it could even potentially take his life. And just before he left for the hike, the last thing I had said to him was, "Brandon, please don't go on the hike." And he said, "We're going, Dad."
A couple of friends had invited me to go hiking for the first time, hadn't hiked. And we first got on the trail, and my friend's name is Mike. He said, "Hey, you know, why don't we go up a different route instead of taking the marked trail?" And we also noticed some teenagers off in the distance were ahead of us, so we immediately were like, we got to beat them to the top. So we kind of had this little competition thing we were thinking in our heads. But along the way, we just periodically saw the teenagers, and it was Brandon and his friends. And we were almost to the peak, and we noticed we could hear real faintly off, like a, you know, help, like real faint. We looked over, and I saw on maybe a peak or two over, like I'm turning this way, he was like over there, and I saw him waving, like I don't know if they were saying hello, whatever, you know, hi. We were kind of, and then the more I paid attention, the more it could tell they were in distress and it was a help. We all decided, hey, you know, something's really wrong. We should go help. I saw Mike, and he had already gone over, and I noticed there's somebody laying on the ground, and he was waving and said, I could hear him say he's not breathing.
My phone rang, and I thought, oh, good, because I had left a note on the counter asking Brandon to call us when he returned home. But the call wasn't coming from the house, it was coming from my other son, Stephen, who was at work. And his message really shook me to the core. He said that the other boys who were hiking with Brandon were trying to call us at the house, but we weren't answering, so they called him, Stephen, I mean. And that Brandon apparently hadn't been feeling well and had been passing out on the mountain, and they needed help.
And I looked down, and it was Brandon, and his lips were purple. He was really pale. His shirt was up a little, and I noticed his stomach, and there was no movement.
We got in our car and started coming home as quickly as we could. It was a good 40 to 45-minute drive. And by the time we got up to the neighborhood at the base of the McDowell Mountains, there were a horde of spectators, ambulances, even helicopters and fire trucks.
I just remember the EMS guy looking at me and trying to like communicate, because we didn't want to say to the teenagers that he was dead. So we just kind of kept it at that, and I don't know how to explain it, but just through our body language and his eye movement, I got the impression we should tell them to walk down, to go ahead and leave. It was okay, we were going to do everything we could to help.
The first person we were introduced to was a chaplain, and that didn't seem like good news to me. And it was probably within 20 minutes of that we were informed that Brandon had passed, which was a devastating thing for us and for any parent to go through. It's beyond words that I can use to describe the pain that we felt and the sense of despair at that moment.
I just couldn't believe it. I'm sitting here looking at a 17, 18-year-old kid dead. You know, what can you say?
I had a lot of questions, as do many people, about concepts of life, death, and life after death.